Now more than ever, companies are focusing on their employees. They are seeking ways to improve company culture, increase employee engagement, and to attract diverse candidates in their hiring pool. But where do they begin? Providing more insights on this topic, I would like to welcome our executive speaker, Julian Sado. Welcome, Julian. Pleasure to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
There's such a new scope to company culture as a whole and what companies are seeking and the new candidates, and also trying to reshape kind of the vision of where they want the company to go. So based on your experience and what you've seen at your different companies and in the different industries that you've worked with, how important is company culture?
Culture is very important, but it's how we mimic and how we advertise our culture is really where the challenge is, right? So there's always a culture. I mean, regardless of what people think, culture is there. When people walk in, they pick something up and they define what that is based off of their perceptions. The challenge is when we're trying to move perceptions, if we're forcing it, people are now more in tune with how they feel. So they feel that push. And when they feel that push, you've damaged the culture. So I think it's very important to understand how to develop a culture, not so much how to word it.
Definitely. So where do you recommend that companies start? Because I think one of the biggest struggles we're seeing right now, especially in this new virtual environment, is this factor of engagement. You know, how do I keep people engaged if they're not sitting in an office, if we're not getting together, socially? What do you believe are some of the best ways to get that kick-started?
It's really about being organic and not having a plan. I mean, that sounds really funny, but the more planning you do, the more ingenuine you become. So when we put process in place, we end up separating ourselves from the process. And that is where the challenge lies. So it's really about being organic. 2D environment. The brain doesn't develop what we call a mirror neuron, where people can actually feel empathy towards one another. So that ability to feel connected is really severed. And so it takes a lot of effort to know how to develop that. And it usually happens with small things, not the big things. Right. Some people get really offended with a gift card of $25. I've been working, every day over time, and you give me a $25 gift card? Really? So some people might say, hey, just the phone call. And say, look, I don't know you, but I know you work for us. So you've been here for so long. I just want to thank you for that. I'd love to maybe get some coffee with you one day on a Zoom. Hear what makes you tick, what passions you have, what drives you, what do you want to be? I know you don't want to work here. Let's be real. No one grew up and graduated saying, one day I want to work for somebody and be told what to do. I mean, everyone has a dream. So tapping into that is really the key. And it really is a small thing, a small gesture, 5 minutes a day.
Yeah, and I think that's really something we're starting to see is this trend of more transparency and also the sense of humanity as we realize people are really bringing work into their homes and they've got kids that are, having to go to school at the same time. And we're really seeing the pressure being put on people unlike ever before. And so I think it really is just taking those little bits of time to getting to know the people around you, even if it's just to tune in to say, hey, how are you doing? As opposed to a gift card. Now, depends on where that gift card's to, because if it's Amazon, I will take it. But no, I see what you're saying. Really, taking that extra time to get to know somebody and really putting meaning into it. At the end of the day, it means a lot more to people than like you said, just something simple.
And then just have a conversation. But have the conversation, you be open first. Right. I haven't really been struggling a lot as much as some, but here's some of the things I have been struggling with. Then they tell you what they've been struggling with. But when you ask people how they're doing and you don't tell anybody how you're doing and you're just great, their answer to you is, I'm great. And you never really get to the core.
In terms of, I want to talk a little bit about spiritual leadership, because that's something that's becoming a really common trend right now, especially in the HR space. We're seeing a lot of turmoil. How do you keep employees engaged? How do you keep them positive and moving toward the same goal while they're going through all of this around them?
You can only engage with yourself. You can only motivate you. People mirror what they sense you are. So the more you try to encourage others, you first have to ask, what reflection am I giving? Leaders tend to talk with authority or with concern. We need to do this. We have to do this. And what you're telling people is you need to be concerned. There's new science in 1984 or 94, I should say, discovered that there's 40,000 brain-like cells in the heart. And that's actually 5,000 times stronger than the electromagnetic waves in the brain. So people pick up what we call in the spiritual world frequencies or energy from people. And when you have that feeling, it's that gut that says this person's either genuine, ungenuine. This is not about teaching others anything. You don't teach people anything. You just be something. And in that being, people start mirroring and mimicking that being. And that's hard for leaders when we're focused on data and process and improvements and also, production.
Yeah, I think that's such incredible advice. And just, as you said, taking meaning, with everyone around you. Now I want to shift gears a little bit and talk about diversity, because obviously that's another big trend, a big influx that we're seeing this year, which is incredible, especially in this virtual world, because now companies are able to hire so many more diverse candidates than they would have had they had to hire in, their exact location. Talk to me about the importance of that, whether you believe programs need to be put in place, and if they are, the best way to do that.
Well, this one could get me in trouble. You know that, Britt. So just so you know, I'm African American, but I look Hispanic. My whole family is from Louisiana. My father's from Hawaii. I mean, I grew up in a diverse world, not just from being African American, but also my own community, because I don't look like my cousins and nephews and stuff. So diversity is very important to me. But so the more you fight something, the more you become what you fight. That is across the board logic. So the more I bring up the word diversity, the more I'm making it evident that I'm different than you. And there is a need for us to know this stuff. But the concept of going about it has to be in a way that's not insightful of anger, fear, and aggression. Do you like sports cars or SUVs? You might say you like SUVs. Mm-hmm. Another person might say they like sports cars. You don't care. You don't find there's anything wrong with that. You can say you have a bias towards sports cars. I have a bias towards SUVs. But if I ask everyone to stand up who's ever been hurt by someone that they've cared for, everyone stands up. You see, we all have the same feelings. Just look at the inward person, and that's the key to diversity.
I love that. I think it's such a unique idea because, right now there is so much pressure for companies to implement these diversity programs, but in their head, they're like, where do we start? How do we make sure we're still getting good candidates, make sure that we're bringing on the right people, and also people that still feel the passion for the company that they're joining on the team for. Based on everything you just described there, for a company that's looking to make their first step into developing this program, what do you believe are some of the key areas they should focus on?
Temperament. Temperament is the number one thing. It really isn't about having to have an African-American run it. Mm-hmm. It really is about having the right person run it. And it really goes back to challenging what you're looking at. There's a lot of companies now that are now just disregarding, college. And to be honest with you, I agree with that. You look at experience, you look at character, you look at competency, you look at communication skills, you look at the things that, really, using your own gut instincts of what works for your team. And it shouldn't be someone you always agree with. I think the challenge we're also faced with, we want to find people that make us feel comfortable in what we've already agreed upon. So find people that are going to challenge you with love or with respect and dignity.
Yeah, I think that's incredible advice. And I try to always, surround people that are going to challenge me or say, that's not a great idea. Here's something better. I think you nailed it on the head. A bachelor degree can be great in some respects, but at the end of the day, if you have someone who's creative, who's passionate, who has experience in a multitude of areas that can bring so much to the table, that all goes out the window, right? That bachelor's degree means nothing. And I think that's really what we're starting to see this year now more than ever is companies are finally beginning to realize that. So I think it's a really cool shift.
So the goal is understanding how to get the right people, period, and then leverage their skills. And I would say people without your experience, Ford hired people that didn't know anything about cars and he was able to design the best car ever for sale. You have Andrew Carnegie, who tore down every building he ever had every 5 years and had his employees come up with the ideas to rebuild it and where to put things and how to make things operate. They're the ones that built the assembly line that he had, not him. And I think leaders need to understand that stepping back and letting creativity flow to its fullest without fearing that I'm going to be ridiculed for my side hustle is going to be the key to really building the right employee.
Mm-hmm. I completely agree. And I think you put it perfectly. You really have to be aware of who it is that you're managing, because you're not going to manage someone who's probably in their 50s the same that you should manage someone in their Gen Z. You just won't, because their personalities are different. What they're looking for in their career is completely different. And I think really being able to identify that and manage them correctly is going to be key. And I think that's also going to be a huge factor in retention and keeping these people on board. What are some insights that you have there as far as making sure that your employees, once they've joined, they're within the company culture, they've got a great career, how do you keep them on board?
Test groups, have testers, be willing to fail. Scientists fail all the time. They call it science. Mm-hmm. pick that up. Understand that only way we figure out things is to fail at it 1,000 times until we get it right. Let these creative people go out there and reward the failure. I know it sounds insane, but put some expenses in the failure, not clarity, and not what we call security. What we've done in corporate is we've asked people to put together proposals for things, how things are going to work. What happens is the fear is driving the ideas, and there's safety in what's already been done. This is why nothing changes, because we're using the same models we've always used, but now you have a different culture. Right. So those models aren't going to work anymore. So getting money aside for the failure. And when you do that, those people are going to be the ones that are going to market your company. They're going to be talking about what they're creating, what they're developing. That is your branding, is when you have your frontline employees talking about what they're creating at your company.
Another thing you mentioned there that's so crucial is, in order to make someone feel like they're part of a company, they're part of that growth and what it's becoming, is if they've actually been able to implement some of their ideas, some of their creativity and who they are. Otherwise, it just becomes a mundane job for them, Absolutely. Hitting the daily task. There's nothing outside of that, and there's no future for them in the company as a whole. So I think that is crucial for people moving forward, really, no matter what generation that employee's in. And I mean, I'm a millennial, so I can list many faults of the millennials that we have, but we also bring a lot of our tech savvy, a lot of creativity, a lot of more openness that,
And I dressed in 80s clothing, so we're
all right, you win. You 100% win.
That's right.
And to wrap up our conversation today, I think, the final most pressing point that we're seeing in HR today is recruiting talent. And we see it in our own company here. There is so much talent out there, but there's also a competitive market for companies that are all looking for the same thing. How do you put yourself above the rest? How do you put your company out there into the spotlight and really provide these candidates with a great offering?
Recruiting starts from the front line. It really does. Your goal is to do everything you can, not just have a referral program, but when you do have somebody who's referred, are you marketing that internally? Are you showing the connection? Are you giving people the visual story of what that looks like? Company's responsibility is to make sure that they look good to the people that are already there. Right. That is what's going to drive the recruiting.
I love that. I think that is really, and I don't think many companies look at it that way, but you have to make the people that are currently there happy. And then people joining on, they see that reflection. Recruiters are always going to be there, but at the end of the day, I could list off 10 companies right now that I have great company culture because I have friends that work there, or, exactly. I've seen reviews online, because that's everything now. So it's so true. Worry about the people you have there first. And to finish up our conversation today, our audience is obviously senior level executives within the HR function. Final pieces of advice for them as they kind of move into this new HR universe that we're seeing with all of these changes.
Be willing to unlearn what you've learned about your role. Be willing to adapt, be willing to change, and recognize how, if you've seen the same thing, doing the same thing over and over, you have to change first before you convince others to change. Don't use your title as a beacon. Use your humanness as a beacon. And that will be the key to everything.
Beautifully said. Yeah, I think that's incredible. And really, for leaders, not even just in the HR function, but across the board, I think you take that advice to heart. And really, it's what we're seeing in the industry right now, and really the way forward, and what employees are looking for in their leaders and everyone that they want to work for. So Absolutely. Incredible advice, Julian. Thank you so much for being here. This has been a fascinating conversation today, and thank you.
Thank you.